Okay, we're live.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, May the 12th. We call the meeting to order at 6:32, and we will begin with playing the national anthem. All right, we'd like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Shelburne resides within the traditional territory and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Chippewa, and the people of the Three Fires Confederacy. These traditional territories upon which we live, work, play, and learn are steeped in rich Indigenous history and traditions, and it is with this statement that we declare to honor and respect the past and present connection of Indigenous peoples with this land, its waterways, and resources. Are there any notices of disclosures of pecuniary interest for this evening? No? Okay. All right. Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes from our regular meeting of April 28th? Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Bernardo. Anything to discuss on those? Okay, all in favor? That's carried. All right. Were there any questions submitted for question period?
No, sir, no questions.
Okay. All right, so we have one presentation this evening and then a couple of proclamations. So at this point, I would like to introduce Murray Short from RLB, who was our auditor this year, and Murray's going to walk us through the financial statements. So Murray, over to you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Appreciate the opportunity to present the draft financial statements at tonight's meeting. And there we go, just getting them up on screen here. So as we have in the past, we have a PowerPoint presentation. This PowerPoint does show the primary statements within the financial statements themselves that accompany the PowerPoint within the council package for tonight's meeting. So what I would propose to do is walk through the PowerPoint, not the financial statements separately afterwards, because again, most of the primary information is included within the PowerPoint. But if there are questions from council on the rest of the financial statements, happy to address those as well. So with that said, thank you very much to your finance team. It's no small feat getting through an audit. And so we're happy to be able to present the draft financial statements with their full cooperation and support getting us through to this point. As you know, financial statements for municipalities are quite complex, and the underlying financial reporting is equally as complex. And so it is with thanks that for their support that we're able to present at tonight's meeting. So the next slide is just an agenda, just talking a bit about the audit itself, and then walking through the audit report and financial statements as they're included within this presentation, and the key graphs that we present at each meeting. at each council meeting, I should say, and then get to the next steps in order to finalize and complete the financial statements. So just moving on to the next slide, just a bit of an overview. Our materiality for our audit is 790,000. So that's the number that allows us to sign off on our audit report that the financial statements are presented correctly in all material respects. So that's the number that we use in order to kind of determine the extent of testing. It doesn't mean we're only looking at $790,000 transactions by any means. We look at much smaller amounts using the various testing that we do in our audit process, but that's ultimately the number that we use to sign off on our audit report, that they're presented, the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. We did present a pre-audit communication letter, or it was included in a council package back in the fall, just provided for information to council. There were no significant changes to our audit plan from that pre-audit communication to our actual audit process itself. And we didn't come across any challenges in the audit in terms of internal control deficiencies, any missing information, no independence issues in terms of our independence as auditors for the municipality. And in terms of adjusting entries, really very clean audit as far as municipal audits go. The town brings us any adjusting entries that they encounter in their wrap-up process. So there was a handful of those. And then most of the rest of the entries that we're booking are to consolidate the various local boards into the financial statements for the town itself, including CDRC, the BIA, and library, and so on. So those are all standard entries that we would make. We didn't have any unadjusted differences or anything where we proposed an entry that was not booked in the financial statement. So these are presented fairly as a result of our audit. The next slide just highlights a bit of information in the audit report within the draft financial statements themselves. The audit report is basically covers 2 pages, and there's a lot of information on the responsibilities of municipal staff and management, and then our responsibilities, your auditors. But most importantly, it is a clean audit opinion, so that's what we've highlighted here, that the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. The next slide gives information about the statement of financial position, which will follow on the next slide to this one. But basically, the statement of financial position is the balance sheet for the town of Shelburne at December 31st, 2024, with comparative numbers from 2023. It shows the assets, liabilities, and the accumulated surplus, and includes things like cash, investments, taxes receivable, and tangible capital assets, as well as the accumulated surplus as mentioned. So if we jump to the next slide, you will see the statement of financial position here. So you can see the cash has decreased by about $1 million. We'll get to the cash flow statement, but essentially your development charge reserve funds have decreased. There were some credits issued in the year to the tune of $2.9 million, net of the regular operations of the township, and then about over $5 million of capital asset investments in the year. Your cash positions come down a little bit, but still a strong position, as we'll see in subsequent slides. Particularly your reserves and reserve funds are quite strong relative to other municipalities that we have as clients. Portfolio investments down slightly as well. And then you'll see taxes receivable and accounts receivable both up. Taxes receivable, we are seeing a trend over the last few years that taxes receivable have increased across most of our municipal clients, so it's not a surprise. Yours has increased a little more, and we'll see that in a graph as well. But again, it seems to be a trend that we're seeing across most municipalities these days, or in the last couple of years anyways. Accounts receivable is up largely because of grants and water sewer receivables. So the grants will fluctuate from year to year, depending on what grant, capital grants in particular, that you're approved for from one year to the next. And then your water sewer fees are increasing and a higher receivable at the end of this year. So no surprise there. In the liability section, you can see that there's some variability, particularly the deferred revenue line. That includes the development charges reserve fund. So that's the reason that that's down is, again, the $2.9 million in credits. And we'll see that in a subsequent slide as well. But basically, your DCs have decreased, or what you have on hand from DCs in the past is down this year versus prior years. And then your long-term debt is down. So you've paid down your debt over the course of the regular repayment schedule. And so that balance is down as well. Down towards the bottom, we have tangible capital assets. You can see about $83.5 million versus 81.2 at the end of last year. So again, about $5.2 million invested in capital assets this year versus amortization on those assets of about 2.7 million. So overall, then your tangible capital assets have increased up to that 83.5, or about $2.3 million year over year. Down at the bottom is the accumulated surplus, which has increased as a result of the surplus on the year to 95.3. Most of that is now invested in capital assets. That 83.5 million we can see in the assets, non-financial assets section. So the next slide is the first of various graphs that we'll present. And as I said, your cash position is strong relative to other municipalities. So the green and blue lines that you're seeing on here are the town of Shelburne's cash position, and the blue one being the average of our other municipal clients. The bars, the yellow bar is your cash outflows, and the green is your total cash. So basically, it's saying that you have about 1.5 times the amount of cash on hand at the end of the year than the cash that you paid out throughout the year for regular operating expenses, capital asset additions, debt repayment, and those sorts of things. So that's a strong financial position to be in. Basically, it says that you have, plenty of cash on hand. Obviously, most of that cash is invested in your reserves and reserve funds, so it's not cash that you want to spend. It's kind of available to be spent on future expenditures, mostly capital expenditures, but it's held in hand for a reason, and so prudent to have that strong reserve and reserve fund positions. And we'll see that substantiated in a subsequent slide as well. The next slide is the taxes receivable slide. So this is where I said you can see the increase over the last several years. I will say that there can be a couple of things that are skewing this and making your taxes receivable showing the increase being greater than the other of our municipalities. Part of that is that we're still kind of working through the audit process for a number of our audits. And so their numbers will be reflected at the 2023 if we haven't gotten a confident number in for their taxes receivable at the end of 2024. So I would expect that as we wrap up more of our audits, the blue line will increase more substantially because, as I said, we are seeing fairly consistently the taxes receivable have been increasing over the last couple of years. The other thing that can make this somewhat of an unfair comparison is that depending on the timing of supplemental taxes being levied, if there's a fair amount levied towards the end of the year, or one municipality has greater supplemental taxes than another, that can create a bit of an unfair comparison, because if you're just getting MPAC assessments for increased assessment values on a number of properties in December, for example, by the time those tax bills go out and are paid, you're into the new year, so your tax receivable is going to be higher as a result. So I think that might be at play here a bit. But suffice it to say that across most of our municipalities, as you can see, the number has increased. Yours has as well. So we are generally recommending municipalities to, put a bit more of an emphasis on some of their collections of taxes receivable, but not a judgment call on the work of your staff by any means. Just seems to be fairly consistent across the board. The taxes receivable have been increasing through most municipalities. If we move on to the next slide, this is your investments in tangible capital assets as a percentage of your total tax revenue. So the reason that we compare the capital asset additions versus total tax revenues to try and normalize for the size of different municipalities. Shelburne is about the average size of most of our municipal governments, some smaller, some larger, but you're kind of right in the kind of average spot of where most of our municipalities are. So this does, though, adjust for some of the smaller and larger municipalities to try and normalize for that. You can see that the green line being your capital asset additions are below the blue line in 3 out of 5 of the past 5 years. That's not a concern. Generally, you're kind of following the same trend, a little lower in the last couple of years, but not a concern from our standpoint. And we're not experts or don't profess to know what your investments in tangible capital assets should be. We're just presenting the financial reality of what was spent. But it's not an indication that you should have spent more. It's just kind of a relative comparison of what has been spent in the last 5 years. The next slide then shows capital asset additions versus what was budgeted. So blue is your actual additions, green is what was budgeted each year, and then yellow is your amortization. Not surprising that the budgeted amount is typically higher than your actual additions. Your staff does the best job they can at the start of the year of budgeting for what's going to be spent in the year on capital asset additions, but because of changes in funding or grants that aren't received, or projects that are a little slower getting going, it's not surprising that you would have expenditures that are less. And in fact, part of the reason that your budget is higher is because then if a project carries forward into a subsequent year, then it's added to the capital budget for that year. So it might be that, some of what's counted as your capital budget for one year is also included in the following year because the project didn't proceed quite as quickly as planned. So the more relevant comparison, I think, is the blue line versus the yellow. So blue is your actual additions. Yellow is the amortization, which is kind of the best estimate we can have as accountants of the kind of wear and tear on your assets. And so the fact that the blue line is significantly above the yellow in all 5 of the last 5 years, I think is a good sign that you're doing the best that you can as a municipality to stay on top of your infrastructure needs. And the next slide then shows the funding for tangible capital assets. In 2022, you can see fair amount more in expenditures than you would have in a typical year, and some of that financed through debt, the blue section there. But in the other 4 of 5 years, most of the funding is coming from capital grants, the purple section, and then reserves and reserve funds, which are the 2 different shades of green, being your obligatory reserve funds and then your discretionary reserve funds set aside by council. So that's fairly standard that we'd expect to see capital grants when they're available, as well as reserves and reserve funds doing most of the financing for your capital additions. Next slide just gives a bit of information on the statement of operations. So this is the income statement for the municipality for the year, if I can use a business term. But basically it shows the revenues and expenses for the year. And then at the bottom, the accumulated surplus. And so if we move to that slide now, you'll see total revenues up to $23.2 million from $22.2 the year before. So we do see increases in taxation revenue and fees and user charges, in particular as the municipality's grown, more developments coming in place, and then the resulting increase in number of properties and assessment, your taxation revenue is increasing, and then correspondingly the fees and user charges increasing as well. So those are both up by about 10%, I guess, in the case of taxation revenue, and 12% in the case of fees and user charges, again, just because of the growth in the municipality. Grants, on the other hand, down somewhat. And again, those will fluctuate from year to year, depending on what capital grants are available and which ones are awarded to the municipality. So this year down a bit. Overall, then, revenues up by about 4%. Correspondingly, we see a 4% increase in expenditures, up to about 17.4 or 17.5 million from 16.7 the year before. And this is broken out by department. In the statements, there's also more detail on breaking out by type of expense. But basically salaries and benefits up somewhat from the year before, amortization up as you've invested more in capital assets. Your amortization will tend to follow. Contracted services and materials being down, just generally across the board. So overall, with revenues and expenditures both being up by about 4%, your annual surplus is fairly comparable to last year at about 5.7 million, from about 5.5 the year before. And so then you wind up with the accumulated surplus up to 95.3 down at the bottom. So the next slide shows the expenditures by department. Not surprisingly, protection services, environmental services, and transportation being the three largest departments by expenditure. And if we move to the next slide, you can see that that's pretty consistent over the last several years. We don't expect to see a huge amount of variability in kind of the relative percentages, but you do see that there's some. But obviously, those three are the most significant ones to the municipality in terms of dollar value. Next slide just gives a bit of information on the statement of changes in net financial assets. So this basically backs out the activity related to tangible capital assets and non-financial assets. And so it shows basically the relative change in your net financial position. And so if we move to that slide, we start with the annual surplus, but again, we kind of remove all of the activity related to tangible capital assets as well as inventory and prepaids, and it culminates in the change in your net financial assets. So overall, your net financial position increased by about 3.4 million to 11.7. So although your cash and investments are down somewhat, your liabilities decreased by more, including the development charges reserve fund. And so that's why your net financial position is actually stronger this year than at the end of last year. Next slide just gives a bit of information on the statement of cash flows. Basically, it just shows the change in cash over the year. And so if we move to that slide, I will not go through every line here. I'll just highlight a few key numbers. So almost halfway down, you see 4.34 million. That's the positive cash generated from the operations of the municipality. Just below that, we see repayment of long-term debt of 736 or 737,000. So you've repaid debt from the cash you've generated from operations. You've also then purchased tangible capital assets to the tune of 5.16 million, and then did redeem or redeem some investments, or your investments decreased in value. So that's positive on the cash side. So on net of all of those things is that your cash position did decrease by about $1.1 million. Essentially, your cash flow from your operations, not quite enough to cover your long-term debt repayments and capital asset additions on the year. So the next slide just gives a bit of information on the schedule of accumulated surplus. So again, there's about $95.3 million of total accumulated surplus. Most of that is your investment in capital assets. So you have the total capital assets of 83.5 million, but then a portion of that is funded by long-term debt. So that decreases your own investment until you've repaid that debt. But your overall investment in capital assets is about 76.5 million. Just below that, we have the kind of general fund balances for the various local boards, the library, the CDRC, and so on, as well as some unfunded liabilities for post-employment benefits, as well as solid waste closure and post-closure costs. So those are liabilities on the balance sheet related to future expenditures that will be required. And then just below that, we have the reserves and reserve funds. So this excludes development charges as well as your gas tax. Those are externally restricted, so they show up elsewhere, and we'll get to a slide that shows those. But you can see that these reserves and reserve funds are up fairly significantly, especially the reserves. And that's part of the reason that or coming as a result of the surplus that we saw on the year. Down at the bottom, we have a note that says that your operating surplus for the year was 647,000. But as per council direction, that is transferred into reserves at the end of the year. And so that's not showing as a separate general fund balance up at the top. It's included within the reserves down towards the bottom of the schedule. So the next slide just describes deferred revenue. So this is your obligatory reserve funds and various other deferred items. So this is money you've received that you haven't yet spent, but the reason that it's not showing in your accumulated surplus, it's showing as a liability in deferred revenue, is that they're externally restricted. So development charges restricted by the Development Charges Act, gas tax restricted by your gas tax agreement with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And so they're shown as deferred revenue. And so if we jump to the next slide, this is where you see that $2.9 million of credits issued related to development charges. So you did receive development charges in the year. Your development charges and your gas tax reserve funds are accruing interest. And so you can see those amounts, but the DC reserve fund in particular decreasing because of those credit issues as well as about $1.7 million spent out of that reserve fund for some of your capital projects in the year. So your development charges reserve fund down a fair amount, your gas tax reserve fund up somewhat at the end of the year. And so that takes us to the last graph, I believe, which shows your overall reserve funds. If we jump to the next slide. So this is combining the reserve funds that we saw in the last slide, your development charges and gas tax, but also all the reserves and reserve funds that we saw on the schedule of accumulated surplus. So this is the total of all of the reserves and reserve funds that the municipality has to cover future expenditures. And this is where you can see where I was saying that the municipality is in a strong financial position in terms of having significant resources set aside. Basically, if, again, comparing to total tax revenue, you have about 3.3 times the amount that you raise in tax sitting in those reserves and reserve funds. The average of other municipalities is about 2.4 times. So again, not commenting on how much you need to spend in the future from a strictly dollar standpoint relative to the size of your municipality, you have more set aside in reserves and reserve funds, which sets you up well for future capital expenditures that may be needed. But to understand what your capital asset needs are, your expenditure needs are, that's more the realm of engineers and your capable management team, not your external accountant. So that takes us to next steps. So subject to your approval tonight, we will have management sign the representation letter. So that's our letter which we require to be signed at the end of the audit, just signifying approval of the financial statements by council. Once we have that letter signed, then we'll finalize the financial statements and then we'll be in a position to submit the financial information return, which is due by the end of May. So happy to be in a position to have that filed on time to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And with that, I will happily answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Murray.
Sure.
Are there any questions? No? Okay.
Okay. Great.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you, sir.
Sure. Thank you very much for your time.
See you again next year around this time.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Can I have a motion to just receive and approve the 2024 financial statements as prepared and presented by RLB? Moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Guichardi. All in favor? That's carried. All right. So the first of two proclamations this evening is for Sexual Violence Prevention Month. Whereas Sexual Violence Prevention Month is intended to raise awareness about sexual violence and its impact on all levels of society, and whereas sexual violence is widespread and impacts people of all ages, genders, and ethnicities, and whereas 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men will experience sexual violence in their life, and whereas sexual violence includes any type of sexual activity without consent, consent must be clearly given and can be taken back at any moment. And whereas we must support survivors of all types of sexual violence by offering compassion, non-judgment, and access to services for healing. And whereas we must advocate for policies and practices to prevent sexualized violence from occurring and to support survivors. And whereas with leadership, dedication, and encouragement, we can be successful in fostering a culture of deep respect, empathy, and integrity where sexual violence is not tolerated at any level. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of Council, do hereby proclaim May 2025 as Sexual Violence Prevention Month in the town of Shelburne, and I urge all citizens to stay educated on issues of consent, boundaries, and healthy relationships. The second proclamation is for National Public Works Week, which is May 18th to the 24th. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of the town of Shelburne. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the town of Shelburne to gain knowledge of and to maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in our community. And whereas the year 2025 marks the 65th annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association, now therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor Wade Mills, on behalf of Council, do hereby designate the week of May 18th to the 24th, 2025 as National Public Works Week in the town of Shelburne. Are there any council inquiries tonight? Councillor Bonato.
Yeah, I've got a few. Street cleaning. Jim, I've had some inquiries in my area. Can you inform us as to where we're at with that so that I can let my people know?
Yes, through your worship. Unfortunately, the company that we did choose this year, we did have a number of meetings with them, a pre-meeting before we started any work, and then we had a meeting every week there just on concerns that have appeared. We did have our last meeting with them last Thursday. We were going to meet Friday with our staff, and nobody showed up, so we had to terminate the contract and move on to the next one on the list. They've mobilized in and they're ready to start full tilt tomorrow. Hopefully getting into the next zones. The only zone mostly complete is the original one I was talking about, Zone 3, south of Main Street. That is going to give there is enough work done there that will allow our staff to get out and start painting some of the stop bars, the bicycle lanes, that sort of stuff. But yeah, unfortunately, that has had a big setback there. But we do have the other group starting. Like I say, they mobilized in today and they'll be out tomorrow up in the north end. So.
Okay, that helps a lot. The next question is in regard to the lawns, fixing them from issues that have happened with snow removal on the sidewalk.
Yes, through your worship, we do have stuff starting on that. It was a tough year with that. Lots of activity out there with our equipment running. Not much in the way of frost, so we do have a fair amount of damage at the edge of sidewalks and that sort of thing. So they are starting with that and getting out there now. We'll take some time with the amount of stuff we have out there this year, though.
Thanks. That'll help a bit as well. And I guess the final question, I'm not sure who can answer it, but it's in regard to the ravine, the condo, whatever you want to call it, on the east side of town. The roadway, I think, Jim, you told me at one of our meetings that all that was left was for our engineers to inspect the roadway and something would then start happening. I see no construction at all. Nothing seems to be happening in that area. So, is anything going on? Because I believe that they only have until a certain period of this year before they have to appear before council again and beg for more time on their sewage allotment.
Yes, through your worship, 600 Main Street. We have been wondering what's going on there too. There hasn't been any activity that we've seen there yet this year. There is some fill material that still needs to go in around the storm pond and that, but we haven't seen that activity there yet. And I know Steve Weaver, our planner, has been in contact with the group to edge them on or remind them of their deadlines there. But as of right now, we don't have any feedback from them right now. So.
Interesting. Thank you. That answers my 3 questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wagner.
Thanks so much. Mute button wouldn't show up when I touched my screen, of course. So just a quick question, I guess, probably for Jim as well. I was over at the dog park and noticed that there's really nothing started on Fiddle Park. So just wondering when that sort of is going to get underway. As we know, we've made promises to certain events and things like that, they will only be delayed 1 year. And I'm just concerned that, we've had some nice weather now for quite a while and I don't see anything starting, but maybe the project isn't going to take as long as I think it's going to take. And we don't need that much time, but I'm getting a little nervous that nothing has started over there yet.
Okay, so it's me. So through the mayor, I'll respond to your question, Councillor Bregner. So we had indicated originally with the scope of the project that we expected to be starting the end of May, wrapping up by mid-November. We're a little bit late starting. Some of the pre-site works have been done, and you will see we're in the process of getting one of the RFPs out for the playground. But the site work with respect to everything that's going to be built for the seating for the amphitheater and everything around the pavilion, and all of that will be commencing. So we'll assure you that the events displacement will only be for 1 year. There will not be any secondary impacts.
Okay, thank you. That helps because I was getting a little nervous.
No, and we appreciate that. It's just we had a pretty rough winter, and getting us through the tariff issues and trying to ensure that the way that we were structuring the work and having to do a lot of front ending with the firms that were Canadian based to make sure that we packaged everything. And as council is aware, we had come to you previously with the request to, I guess, defer or eliminate at this time the mini putt so that we could repurpose those funds, particularly as some of the costs related to projects would increase if we were using American firms, for example. And we are also trying to ensure that we maximized our grant applications, and we're still waiting for a couple to come in to see if we can offset some more costs.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much for everyone's hard work on this. I know it hasn't necessarily been easy. So, and then just a secondary question would be, now that the dump station is decommissioned, do we have sort of a timeline just for the community that is watching when the new one will be available at the sewage treatment plant?
So that is a Jim question.
Yes, through your worship, we are, now that we have Fiddle Park's dump station closed, we do have it covered over so it can't be used. There was people trying to use that. Just historically, it's been there for some time, so people know that. We're looking at moving it to the sewage treatment plant, but actually our engineers, SBA, came up with a good temporary measure of putting it over at our shop on Luxton Way, as we do have manholes right out front, right by our fence line. So we're actually going to cut the curb there, make a pull-off area, and connect that right into the sewer system and have the dump station over there. So that work was started last week. Should be complete by the end of this week for the long weekend. Everything's looking good so far there. So we're on schedule for the end of the week. So with any luck, we'll be open by Friday there. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great news. Okay, so now with that, any chance we can do a little bit of a social media notification and maybe a sign at the old dump site where the new dump site is, just so that we inform people as best we can?
So that's me. Yes, exactly what you just said is what I was going to convey to you. We will be promoting that this location is moved. Jim said temporary. We will be potentially looking at making this location permanent
Okay,
and free because there may be more advantages even when if the plant is ever expanded than that location. And yes, we will be starting to blitz it out that the new location will be open and when.
perfect. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it. That's it for me.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Councillor Gashardi?
Just a real quick question as it relates to welcome signs for the town of Shelburne. The one on Victoria Street is wonderful and beautiful and proudly standing. Just wondering if we have any plans for the north and the east and west ends of town yet. I know there was we were waiting for some reasons relating to development. Just wondering if there's an update on that.
Denise?
So I'll address the one on the east. We were waiting for the complete finalization of the field gate. With their new plaza going in commercial too, we want to make sure that we're not placing it in a location that's going to, I guess, be affected by the back end of that future building. I thought we already had the north, but I'm going to let maybe Jim do that, and if not, we'll follow up with you tomorrow, and I'll consult with my colleagues.
Yes, sir, your worship. We'd have to check with other staff there. We were making an application to the Ministry of Transportation as well as to the county for incoming on 124 on the north side there. So we'll just have to do a follow-up there and just check on the status of where those applications are at.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right, so we'll move on then. Just one actual report listed this evening, and that is a report from our clerk regarding the implications of the new strong mayor's powers. So Jennifer?
Thank you. And through your worship, this is the first of many reports to be brought forward as staff continue to comprehend and understand the implications of the legislation and how the extension of strong mayor powers affects the town of Shelburne and processes going forward. So I'm going to share my screen and just go through the report page by page with council. I'm hoping we can hold off and have questions after the fact. We'll do our best to answer questions as we can, understanding we're still learning as we go as well. I will share my screen. Okay, so on September 7th, 2022, Bill 3 received royal assent, known as the Strong Mayors Building Homes Act. The act gives the head of council the authority to exercise certain powers if there is potential to advance prescribed provincial priorities, which are building 1.5 million new residential units by December 31st, 2031, constructing and maintaining infrastructure to support housing, including transit, roads, utilities, and servicing. So moving down to the list of strong mayor powers and duties, the first one on the list is proposing and adopting the municipality's annual budget. The powers and duties of the municipality with respect to proposing and adopting a budget are now assigned to the mayor. The mayor's duty to prepare and adopt the budget is substituted for council's duty to prepare and adopt the budget. A few best practice notes in there. As a best practice, the mayor could issue a direction to have staff prepare the budget. If the mayor chooses not to propose a budget, a mayoral direction is still required to direct staff to bring it forward. A sample of a mayoral direction has been attached as Appendix 2 to the report. So council no longer approves the budget. It is now the mayor's budget, which the mayor must propose and adopt, subject to council amendments. The Ontario Regulation 530-2022 defines a process to approve budgets. The mayor is required to provide a proposed budget to council, the clerk, and the public by February 1st of each year. If the mayor does not propose a budget to council by February 1st, it automatically defaults to a council budget which is our traditional method of the budget process. Council can propose amendments to the budget, and the mayor can also propose changes. This is one of the duties that the mayor cannot delegate, and it must be issued as a staff directive in order to bring the budget forward. After receiving the proposed budget from the mayor, council may, within 30 days, pass a resolution amending the budget. The mayor then has 10 days after the council amendment to veto the amendment. The mayor is required to provide the veto to each member of council and to the clerk, including the reasons for the veto in writing. Council then has 15 days after notification of the veto to override the veto with a 2/3 vote within 15 days of the expiry of the veto period. Council may override the mayor's veto with 2/3 vote. The mayor may also vote on the override. After the expiry of the time period for council to override the mayor's veto, the proposed budget is deemed to be adopted by the municipality and does not require a vote of council. So this entire process is 55 days. Just adds 55 days to the budget process. So I've attached as Appendix 3 a budget scenario flow chart. Still somewhat a little confusing, but provides a process of if yes, then this, if no, then this. We're still trying to comprehend the process as well, but we'll learn as we go. So item number 2, ability to veto certain bylaws passed by council. The mayor can veto bylaws that interfere with provincial priorities. The veto powers apply to the following types of bylaws: the Municipal Act, the Planning Act, and any other.
Sorry, Jennifer.
Sorry.
Sorry, I think we just need to skip to the next page there. We're still in the budget slide.
Sorry about that. It's actually the next page. There you go.
Okay.
Any other prescribed act. So it's the Municipal Act, the Planning Act, and any other prescribed act or regulation or prescribed section of an act or regulation. It includes bylaws under Section 2 of the Development Charges Act as well. If the mayor is of the opinion that all or part of a bylaw could potentially interfere with a prescribed provincial priority, the mayor can veto the bylaw by providing written notice of intention to consider a veto within 2 days of passing the bylaw. The written notice must provide reasons and be given to the clerk. The clerk must give notice to council and the public by the next business day. If notice is provided, the mayor has 14 days from the date of passing of the bylaw to veto the bylaw. This includes the confirming bylaw, which is the bylaw we pass at the end of each council meeting. We've added some additional wording to the bylaw to indicate that whether the bylaws are deemed to be confirmed separately. The mayor cannot veto a bylaw after giving his approval. If the mayor vetoes a bylaw, it will be noted on minutes when they are brought forward for adoption. Within 21 days of receiving the veto, council can override the veto with a 2/3 vote, and the mayor may also vote on the override. A bylaw is deemed passed on the next day after the process is exhausted. So given the above timeframes, it is recommended that the planning department will be required to provide at least 1 week's notice to the clerk and the mayor of upcoming planning bylaws. Mayoral decision templates for approving and vetoing a bylaw are being drafted and will be presented to the mayor at the time of signing the bylaws. Attached as Appendix 4 is a flow chart of the bylaw scenario, which we are still trying to understand ourselves. This adds 22 days to the passing of a bylaw. But more information, as we learn and go forward with the process, more information will definitely be provided to council. So item number 3, the power to hire, dismiss, or exercise any other prescribed employment powers of various senior managers, including the CAO and various heads of any part of the organizational structure. The mayor has been assigned the powers of the municipality under Section 229, which are to appoint or dismiss a chief administrative officer. The mayor has been given the power to determine the organizational structure, including hiring, dismissing, or other prescribed employment powers regarding the head or supervisor or manager of any division or organizational structure. There are exemptions for specific statutory officers. However, the organizational structure remains the same unless the mayor makes a change. The mayor has the ability to delegate this power only to members of council. Included in there is the list of statutory officers. Item number 4, the power to establish or dissolve prescribed committees. The mayor has the authority to establish and dissolve prescribed committees, assign them functions, and appoint the chairs and vice chairs of local boards and committees. Currently, prescribed committees are those that consist solely of members of council. So, for example, Committee of Adjustment is solely members of council, our Municipal Grant Funding Committee, and our Committee of Council that appoints committee members. Those are the only committees at the moment that we have solely comprised of council members. The power to appoint chairs and vice chairs of local boards depends on the regulation. At this point, no regulations have been made, therefore this power remains dormant. Number 5 is the ability to require council to consider a matter at a meeting and vote on a bylaw at a meeting. The mayor may require council to consider a matter that could advance a prescribed provincial priority. This means that the mayor can bypass the procedure bylaw regarding notice requirements, agenda deadlines, and reopening rules. The mayor may propose bylaws under the Municipal Act, the Planning Act, and any other prescribed act or regulation or prescribed section of an act or regulation, and require council to consider and vote on the proposed bylaw at a meeting. The mayor is required to provide the clerk and every member of council with a copy of the bylaw and the reasons for the proposal, which will be provided by a mayoral decision. This type of bylaw is passed if more than 1/3 of the members of council vote in favor. 1/3 of members is 2.3, so technically 2 members of council can vote on that. As the mayor can require council to consider and vote on a bylaw and requires only 1/3 of the members of council to pass the bylaw, council does not have the option to amend the bylaw. However, the mayor could retract the bylaw, amend it, and reintroduce the bylaw, as there are no timelines expressed in the legislation. The mayor would have to provide a copy of the bylaw and the reasons for the proposal to the clerk and each member of council in writing. The new provisions do not relieve the mayor from following notice provisions required under the Planning Act. If the mayor intends to exercise the power to introduce a matter or bylaw, staff recommend the mayor issue a mayoral directive first. This allows staff to do the required research on the bylaw or the matter, and then once complete, issue a mayoral decision to propose it to council. This will allow thorough research to be conducted and will assist the mayor in drafting any proposed matters or bylaws. Staff are in the process of developing a mayoral directive template for use by the mayor for bringing forward a matter and a bylaw. Staff will also develop wording to identify matters and bylaws on an agenda item brought forward by the mayor, which will result in changes needing to be made to the procedure bylaw. Item number 6 is the authority to direct employees to undertake research and provide advice to the mayor and the municipality. The mayor has been given authority to direct staff to undertake research and provide advice to the mayor and the municipality on policies and programs of the municipality or of the mayor as they relate to the powers and duties under Part 6.1, special powers and duties of the head of council, and carry out duties related to the exercise of the power or performance of the duty, including implementing any decisions made by the mayor under Part 6.1. So examples include working on the budget, changing the organizational structure. The direction must be provided in writing and must be available to the public. Any direction to staff must be provided to the clerk and CEO by the next business day. So mayoral decisions and directives. Mayoral decisions are records of decisions made by the mayor regarding governance and policy. Mayoral directives are mayoral directives are records of directions made by the mayor and given to staff to do research and preparation on an item under Section 284.3 of the Act. Mayoral decisions and mayoral directives can be revoked and replaced by other decisions and directives. When exercising a power or performing a duty under Part 6.1, the mayor is required to do so in writing and provide a written record to each member of council and to the clerk. The records are also required to be made available to the public. How the records are made available to the public is not further described. However, other jurisdictions have created an online repository on their website. Mayoral decision and mayoral directive forms have been drafted. The mayor will forward the documents to the clerk's office for numbering and adding to the website. Decisions and directives are an official document. The acting or deputy mayor does not inherit special powers and duties under Part 6.1. Any decisions made or power exercised by the mayor cannot be quashed or judicially reviewed for unreasonableness if made legally and in good faith. So as a side note, staff have been advised there has been a case brought forward in Peterborough by a group of residents against the mayor who utilized his strong mayor powers to move forward a development. Depending on the decision to be made by the Superior Court, this could be precedent setting. That court case is being heard in June, so we won't have any information to provide on that until after the Superior Court has made their decision. So should a vacancy of the mayor become imminent, Part 6.1 eliminates the option to appoint a head of council in the event of a vacancy occurring before March 31st in an election year. A by-election is required to be held. If a vacancy occurs after March 31st in an election year, an appointment is required, and the appointed head does not inherit the powers and duties under Part 6.1, Section 284.12, subsection 3. So what if the mayor wants to decline the powers and duties? The mayor's powers to advance or protect provincial priorities cannot be surrendered. The mayor can provide a promise not to use them, but the promise is not binding. The mayor will have to issue a mayoral direction or decision to delegate the following powers. So a mayoral decision is required to appoint the CAO, and only the delegation can go to council. The power to appoint heads of organizational units can be delegated to the CAO or to council. The power to determine the organizational structure can be delegated to the CAO or to council. Powers to establish, determine functions, and appoint chairs and vice chairs of committees is only delegated to council. So next steps for staff are reviewing the current policies and bylaws that are affected by the strong mayor's powers. The list provided in the report is not exhaustive. Right now, it's just a cursory review of what policies and bylaws are required to be changed. We are working on creating a repository on the town's website to publish mayoral directives and decisions. It has yet to be determined whether any of the strong mayor powers are affected by restricted acts after nomination day, or as we know, as lame duck. And a reminder that council could enter what's called a lame duck period once the nomination for municipal election candidates closes, depending on how many of the existing council members are seeking re-election. So currently Shelburne Council has 7 members. At least 5 of the existing councillors would have to seek re-election without running against each other for a single seat. So you'd have to seek re-election with your current seat. If that doesn't happen, then we are in lame duck. Let's see. So if the office of the mayor becomes vacant after exercising any veto power, but before the statutory process is complete, it has not been determined whether the veto will still apply. This is in regards to vetoing a bylaw. So in summary, the expansion of the strong mayor powers framework to the town of Shelburne represents a major change to the town's administrative political dichotomy that will permanently alter approaches to policy development, recruitment, budgeting, and procedures underpinning governance in the town and eroding the independence of public administration. While there are a number of consequences that are likely unintended from the legislation, the primary objective of the strong mayor powers is to facilitate growth in a timely manner. As such, if the powers are scoped to this specific purpose, the scale of change to be managed can be reduced. Municipalities and associations have expressed concerns regarding the legislation and positions made as to the effectiveness of the powers being given. One of those associations, AMCTO, continues to advocate on behalf of municipalities to the province. So the financial impact have not been fully evaluated as of yet. However, there may be legal expenses associated with undertaking reviews of relevant policies and procedures governing employment matters due to the legislation. Establishing arrangements to accommodate the use of these powers will require dedicated time and resources in the CAO's office, human resources, legislative services, and financial services. There is potential for additional staffing resources and increases in software fees for tracking mayoral decisions and directives. And so this report tonight is just being received as information, and I'm happy to take any questions and hopefully answer them for you.
All right, but before I just open it up for questions, just a couple of things I wanted to mention. So I met with senior staff last Friday afternoon to kind of review this framework that Jennifer's just gone over. So we talked through a number of different things, and how this may look moving forward. And I have advised staff of my intention to issue 2 decisions tomorrow morning. The first will be a decision to delegate the power to appoint the CAO back to council. The second will be a decision to delegate the power to determine the corporation's organizational structure from myself to the CAO where it currently resides now. Beyond that, Carrie and I also talked about the way the budget process is going to look going forward. So that's one of those areas, as Jennifer pointed out, that I can't seem to delegate my way out of. So what I can do is direct staff to actually prepare the draft budget. And as I said to Carrie, I certainly don't plan to be sitting around my house next fall coming up with a draft budget. So I think staff will go ahead and prepare the draft in much the same way that they have in the past. And I think probably what we're going to be doing over the next couple of months is just figuring out how we can make the budget process under this new framework look as much like the way it has looked in the past as possible. Certainly, it's my intention, even though the budget doesn't have to be formally adopted by council. I think all of you know me well enough to know that this is going to be a team effort. So we'll continue to go through the process as we have, including public input. There is no requirement for a public budget meeting anymore under this, but I still plan to do that to receive input from the public. Even though traditionally those meetings aren't all that well attended, I do think that it's still important to give the public an opportunity to come out and voice their concerns, opinions, offer feedback on the draft that is being presented. So what I'm asking for in that respect is kind of leave that with us for the time being. I mean, we're under no immediate time crunch in terms of the budget, and we'll try to come up with a framework that, as I say, looks as much like what we're used to as possible. So with that, any questions for Jennifer? I know it's a lot to take in, and I'm still kind of digesting it myself, but Councillor Bernardo.
I got a quick question for you, as the mayor. What I just heard is you get to appoint all the committees and do all the committee work, and I'd be very happy to turn it all over to you and let you do all that under the strong mayor powers. I'm sure maybe Len would, feel the same way. We don't mind turning it over to you.
I don't think you get off the hook quite that easy, Councillor Bernardo. So Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, that the power with respect to committees only extends to what they call prescribed committees, which are committees comprised entirely of members of council. So really, at this point, I mean, we have committee of adjustment, which is all members of council. Is there anything else, Jennifer?
The Municipal Grant Funding Committee.
That's
Right.
that's the one I wanted to turn over to you.
Okay. But I think as part of my decision, I can decide to leave that status quo. So
Oh, thank you. I tried.
I think the three of you do a fine job.
I did try.
Yeah, good effort. And anything else on this? I mean, Councillor Wagner has a notice of motion that we'll get to as the next agenda item. And I think it's still definitely worthwhile advancing that. I mean, as it stands right now, as Jennifer said, these aren't things that I can opt out of. The best I can do is sort of offer these decisions to defer power back to kind of the source that holds it now. But I think concurrent to that, you know, advancing a resolution on behalf of our council, as many other councils are starting to do now throughout the province, kind of sends a strong message that this just isn't a good fit for our community.
Sorry, just a commentary. Yeah.
Yeah.
As a counselor, if I was running in another election, I would feel that my job as a counselor representing the people that have elected me is sort of taken away from me and given to the mayor in a lot of respects and a lot of decisions that, you know, would normally be made by counselors as a whole. And that's why I agree with the motion that Councillor Wagner's put out and what you've been saying. And I think, you know, people that may be running for election in the elections would feel the same way. And like, why bother running? You know, there's no point in running when the mayor has most of the powers and we really don't have all that much power to represent the people we're representing. So I can understand the government part that most feel about this strong mayor powers. That's just a comment.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that the potential certainly exists for that. I mean, I don't think it necessarily has to play out that way, but as we said before, I mean, that kind of largely depends upon the individual sitting in the mayor's seat, because the powers are there. Whether they're exercised or not is another question. As I said from day one, I mean, I certainly don't plan on, you know, having any kind of marked departure from the way we've operated for the last 3 years, but that's not to say that whoever fills this seat next may not take a completely different view of things. So. All right. Well, as Jennifer said, I mean, this will be a bit of an ongoing discussion, and as things get fleshed out, I guess we'll get more reports over time. But in the meantime, I'll go in tomorrow and sign those two decisions, and then Carrie and I'll kind of work collaboratively on crafting a budget process that kind of mirrors what we've been used to as much as we can. So, okay. All right. Thanks, Jennifer. I know that was a lot of work. That's the other piece to this, which I don't think should go without saying. The amount of staff time that has been required, just to kind of, you know, go over all of this stuff and get up to speed on it in a relatively quick order. You know, it really probably isn't the best use of staff time. Particularly when the intention is to expedite things and reduce red tape and move things forward in a faster manner. You know, we just added hours of staff time that really weren't necessary. But anyways, that's just a bit of editorialization, I guess. So with that, can I just have a motion then to receive Jennifer's report for information? Moved by Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. And then somewhat appropriately, I guess that leads us into Councillor Wagner's motion that was presented at the last meeting. Entirely up to you. It's rather lengthy. I know you read it at the last meeting. Do you want to read it again?
I would rather not.
Okay.
I think everyone can read it if they want to.
Yeah. I'd rather not read it again either. I mean, it is there. It's in the agenda. If anybody wants, you know, to read word for word what's there. And kudos to you. I mean, obviously you took some time to craft that carefully. So anybody interested should read it, but or go back and watch the last meeting when you read it out.
Yes, although I did fumble towards the end, so that's why I
That's all right.
Again.
So before we open it for discussion, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Gashardi, second it. Okay, Councillor Wagner, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I mean, just very briefly, because I think you kind of hit all my points there when you were speaking with regards to the report. You know, again, this doesn't have anything to do with your leadership. You know, we know that you've said you're not planning on using these. Clearly, you've reiterated that again just moments ago. You know, I never really thought you would anyways, but as you mentioned also, we don't know who's going to sit in that seat over the next 1 to 2, 3 terms from now, right? And I just feel that this is a slippery slope with regards to, you know, the democratic process that we are, you know, Canada itself is built on. And I almost feel like somewhat what's the point of us as council as a whole if, you know, we're giving all these individual powers sort of to one person. So you know, as we saw within the report, it is a little crazy. It's supposed to reduce the red tape. However, if one person on council or a couple, you know, obviously they say that there's like at least 2 need to vote against a motion or a bylaw or whatnot, it adds days, I mean, to the process. So I'm not quite sure how effective this will be. If we see any kind of councils that do not work as well as we do currently. And, you know, we have seen that also with some councils. And so, yeah, I just feel that it may not go anywhere. I don't know, but, you know, we're not the only municipality that would be potentially bringing this forward. And I think the more municipalities that do, maybe the provincial government will sort of take notice and at least at bare minimum offer some form of opting out. You know, and I don't know what that would look like. Maybe it's a term, you know, basis. Maybe it's forever. I don't know how that would work, but I think there should be something for an individualized municipality to say, hey, no, we don't want this. We would rather just go with, you know, what the norm was. So, you know, hopefully more voices mean more recognition of taking notice that, you know, there's a lot of us who just feel that this may be a little overreach with regards to certain powers and whatnot. So that's just kind of where I was coming from this was future, you know, I may not be in the seat either, right? And I just want to make sure that, you know, we are protected as a community, because once I'm not here, I go right back to being a community member only. So I want to make sure that my council that will be ruling over me when I'm not here has that ability to do so properly and democratically. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Guichardi, seconder, do you want to add anything?
Just my full support for Councillor Wagner's motion. I agree that we're seeing more and more provincial infringement, if you will, on our ability as a municipality to dictate its own direction, and you know, that's ever concerning.
Okay. Other thoughts or comments?
Wait,
Deputy Mayor Hall?
Could I also ask for just a recorded vote for this? I would like it, you know, if it's unanimous, I just want to send a message to the province that we all feel that way.
Good idea. Yep. Deputy Mayor?
And that's exactly what I was just going to request. While it might not mean a whole lot to the people that are going to receive this, it certainly carries a little bit more weight if it's a recorded vote. So I was going to do the same.
Thank you, Shane.
Okay. Councillor Bernardo?
I guess my comment is that the province seems to consistently take something that is a large city issue and try to force it down the necks of smaller municipalities. And large city issues do not fit with small municipalities. This is something that we see in the larger municipalities that they put them on last year. And again, if you're looking at a municipality of 1 million or 500,000 people, it's hugely different from a municipality of 15,000 people or less. So this legislation doesn't fit. And I don't see really how this legislation makes more housing, which is what they're trying to promote.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me at all and how it does that. I don't see many councils and many municipalities saying, no, we don't want any more growth. We just want to stop everything. That to me is the ridiculous part. So I just don't understand this legislation at all. And I totally agree and support.
I think you're right, Councillor Bernardo. You know, since the first round of strong mayor powers were handed out to some of the larger centers, you know, I don't think there really is any empirical evidence that development has moved quicker, that red tape has been reduced, that homes have gone up faster. You know, if there was a marked increase and the data was there to kind of prove that it worked, okay, you know, maybe I could see it. The other part of this, which still kind of puzzles me and troubles me, is that the latest round that were handed out came with no consultation and actually no notice.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned before, you know, Councillor or Mayor Post from Orangeville and I, you know, we're just as surprised as everybody else when the announcement came out, because we saw it in the news. You know, that there was no notification given to us, no consultation at a local level as to, you know, whether or not this was something that was desired or wanted. Just, you know, here you go. You wake up one morning and it's thrown into your lap. So any final comments on this before we call the vote? No. Okay. Jennifer, over to you.
Thank you, through your worship. So a recorded vote has been requested. When I call your name, please indicate yes or no. Councillor Wagner.
Yes.
Councillor Couchardy.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hall.
Yes.
Councillor Bernardo.
Yes.
Councillor Sample.
Yes.
Mayor Mills.
Yes.
Carries unanimously.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Wagner, for bringing that, and we'll get it sent along. See what happens. Councillor Couchardy, I understand you also have a notice of motion for this evening.
That is correct, and this kind of dovetails on this whole idea of provincial oversight and dictatorship towards the municipalities, and it's in regard to Bill 5. So I wish to present a motion of opposition to the province's Bill 5. Bill 5 was introduced in the legislature recently. Proposes major changes that would give the province the power to create special economic zones that override local planning rules, site plans, and public consultation. In addition, Bill 5 also replaces the Endangered Species Act that shifts decision-making from independent scientists to cabinet, eroding standards and timelines for protecting at-risk species and other habitats. While I fully support the need to build more housing and strengthen our local economy, it must never come at the cost of the environment or thoughtful local decision-making. This motion supports responsible growth and protects our environment and respects the role of municipalities and what they must play in shaping the communities where we're building. So hypothetically, if I'm reading this correctly, the province could declare, heaven forbid, the Greenbelt a special economic zone and walk over all of the environmental and plan. I mean, that's worst case scenario planning, but you know, it just opens us up to an awful lot in terms of eroding the environmental protections that we currently have. Because the province consultation deadline is May 17th, I'm requesting council waive notice so that we can submit a response before the May 17th deadline, and also request respectfully a recorded vote. The motion reads as follows, and I've distributed it to council via email and staff. Subject: responsible growth in opposition to portions of Bill 5, Protecting Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act 2025. Whereas the Government of Ontario has introduced Bill 5, Protecting Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act 2025, which proposes substantial changes to environmental planning legislation, including the repeal of the Endangered Species Act and the creation of special economic zones that may override local planning authority. And whereas the town of Shelburne supports increased housing supply and economic growth, but believes this must be achieved without undermining environmental protections or compromising the integrity of municipal planning procedures. And whereas Bill 5, as proposed, risks weakening safeguards for Ontario's natural heritage and reduces the role of municipalities in managing growth in a responsible and locally informed manner. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council for the Town of Shelburne opposes the provisions of Bill 5 that would reduce environmental protections or override municipal planning authority, urges the Province of Ontario to advance housing and infrastructure growth through policies that respect sound environmental planning principles and uphold the planning tools available to local governments, urges the province to support municipalities through ensuring responsible growth through infrastructure projects designed to ensure protections of sensitive wildlife and natural resources, and directs this resolution to be forwarded to Honorable Premier Ford, Honorable Rob Flack, Minister of Municipal Affairs, Honorable Todd McCarthy, Minister of Environment, MPP Sylvia Jones for Dufferin-Caledon, and AMO, and all other municipalities for their awareness and consideration.
Okay. So first I'll ask if there's a seconder to the motion. Councillor Wagner, second. And then because Councillor Guichardi has asked that the motion be considered tonight, as long as there are no objections to that, we're okay. Are there any objections to enforcing the notice requirement on this? Seeing none, okay. So the motion is on the floor and will be considered momentarily. Any discussion on this? Councillor Bernardo.
I would just add, if we are sending this out, that we do also send it out for support to all conservation authorities as well as Conservation Ontario, and add that to the list of the people we're sending it out so that they are notified as well that we are asking for the protection of the environment and wetlands.
Okay.
If that's
Councillor
okay.
Guichardi, I'm assuming you're
No
okay with that?
objection. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other comments? No. Okay. So a recorded vote has been requested again. So Madam Clerk.
Here, please indicate yes or no when I call your name. Councillor Guichardi,
Yes.
Councillor Wegner,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hall,
Yes.
Councillor Bernardo,
Yes.
Councillor Sample,
Yes.
Mayor Mills,
Yes.
and carries unanimously.
Councillor Guichardi.
Sorry, just first of all, thank you, everyone. Secondly, just for a little background, I know other municipalities, including Orangeville, have presented this. I know Councillor Pendergast is presenting this motion or a similar motion to this. So kudos to her for doing her part in that regard as well. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you for bringing it forward. I did mention to Councillor Guichardi this morning that the issue of Bill 5 came up at County Council last Thursday. And again, given the tight commenting timelines, Council asked staff to submit a submission kind of outlining County Council's concerns. So I think there's probably going to be lots of comments flowing in, despite the fact that it was a pretty tight window to comment on. Any other notices of motion? No? Okay. That takes us to communications. Are there any items there that anybody wants to pull out? No? Okay. Can I just get a motion then to receive those items for information? Councillor Sample, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. All in favor? And that's carried. All right. Next item is our closed session, and I would look for a motion allowing us to enter into closed session in accordance with Section 239 sub 2 sub K of the Municipal Act, which is for the purpose of proposing position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. Councillor Sample, thank you. Is the seconder for that? Councillor Wagner? Okay, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, we'll just give staff a couple of minutes to let us move in camera. Anybody who's watching online, I guess they'll just sort of be paused out for a minute, and then we'll come back into open session. They'll be there again. Is that how it works?
We'll have a notice posted that we're in closed session. I'm just going to pause the recording, and then you'll get an invite to go into a breakout room.
Okay. Is that everybody? No. Okay. All right. So we're all back. So we're back in open session. We just have one motion coming out of the closed session portion of the meeting. Be it resolved that council receives the update from the CAO and that staff follow the direction given by council as noted during discussions, and that staff be directed to bring a report back to council in open session. I'll start over. We have one motion coming out of closed session, which reads as follows. Be it resolved that council receives the update from the CAO and that staff follow the direction given by council as noted during discussions, and that staff be directed to bring back a report to council in open session at our May 26th meeting. Can I have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Donato, seconded by Councillor Wagner. All in favor? That's carried. All right, and that just leaves our confirming bylaw. Moved by Donato, seconded by Sample. All in favor? It's carried. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Donato, seconded by Councillor Sample. All in favor? Carried. All right. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Take care.
night.
Recording has
Good night.
stopped.
Ciao.
Jennifer, what would you like us to do with the paper?
The in camera.
Yeah.